One more thing. Well, you probably didn't know this, but I'm quite the entrepreneur. I spend my weekends trying to invent new products. And I think I came across something that I think is going to be very big.
Let's see.
Sometimes I need the hard news of the day, but other times I just want to cuddle. Why can't I have both?
Well, now you can with the new Bret Baier. He's fair and balanced and unafraid to snuggle. Just squeeze his tummy and get informed.
The 41st president wants to go to Maine this summer.
Bret Baier fits in with even the most sophisticated crowds.
Jeff Sessions will not recuse himself from the investigation into the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen.
So get your Bret Baier today.
I'm Bret Baier in Washington, and I'll see you later.
Oh, yeah.
Shark Tank.
Yep.
I mean, people might actually want that.
Yeah, that's the prototype.
I like
prototype.
it.
I like it.
All right, tomorrow, sometimes I have just perfect timing. There's all this foreign policy stuff going on. I have Condoleezza Rice on the show tomorrow, the 2 p.m. show, The Daily Briefing. She just wrote a book called Political Risk. She wrote it with a Hoover Senior Fellow, Amy Ziegart, and we're going to be able to talk about North Korea, Iran. What else? You guys, any other hot spots you want to talk about? China?
Yeah, I want to talk about
Mexico, Syria.
Vermont.
And Vermont.
Central America.
I'm going to put that down there.
Vermont,
so
Teddy
hope
Bear.
you can tune in tomorrow.
We love Condoleezza.
Well, you should also ask her about college basketball. She's the head of the college basketball.
Oh, yeah,
And if
that's
she-
on my
and if
list.
she can
I know
come
a
on-
lot about that.
And
Anyway,
if she can come on the 5.
That's
She
true.
canceled last night.
All right.
I know.
Big
She was
hockey
sick.
night in Nashville. I'm not talking about the Predators playing Winnipeg in Western Conference Finals. It was a big night because the National Hockey League team honored James Shaw Jr. About a week ago, the 29-year-old heroically tackled a gunman who had already killed 4 people and wounded 4 others at a local all-night restaurant. Shaw got to meet the team's coach. He was given his own personalized jersey. And when he was announced to the huge crowd, they gave him a roaring ovation. Shaw has also raised more than $160,000 for the victims of the Waffle House shooting. Way to go. And Predators, you guys go too. That was a really class act.
Amazing. All right, Kimberly.
All right, and at that same hockey game, Carrie Underwood, America's sweetheart, besides Dana Perino, she took the ice at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville over the weekend, and she performed an absolutely flawless rendition of the national anthem. If you would, take a listen.
Can you see by the dawn's early light?
Guys.
How beautiful was that? Now that is how you sing a national anthem. She nailed it, and she did it in front of her husband, Mike Fisher, who is the team's center player. And it's safe to say, I think she was like his good luck charm, because they won a 5-4 win, exactly, the Predators against the Jets.
All right, Fergie should pay attention. That's how you do it. So there was a paddleboarder in Australia, and something ridiculous happened. I think he's paddling along. Oh!
my gosh.
Taken out by a dolphin. It looked like the dolphin did it on purpose.
I hate dolphins.
Did it on purpose, Greg.
I hate dolphins.
Oh, that poor dolphin. He's like, whoa, man,
Body
corny,
checks this
corny
guy.
jokes.
That's amazing.
That also is one of my biggest fears. It's why I don't go out there.
They're violent
That's
animals.
why you don't paddleboard.
They're violent
Also,
animals.
don't go whale watching.
All right.
Dolphins can attack you in other ways, too.
Yeah.
Set your
Very
DVRs. Never miss an episode of The 5. Special report up next. Hey, Brad, how you doing?
You know, I didn't buy into that when you told me what you were doing.
No, you didn't. You didn't. Well, I'm waiting here for you.
Fair, balanced, and
Fun
ready to
night
snuggle.
ahead.
Squeeze it.
Look at his
Okay.
ears. They're so cute. Little
Thank you.
fuzzies.
So cute. All right, this is the Fox News Alert. Tough transition some days. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. The countdown is on. In just 12 days, President Trump will have to decide on whether to re-up the Iran nuclear deal. Just last week, he was pressed by 2 allies to stay in the deal. But today, a shot in the arm, as Israel's prime minister laid out what he says is evidence that Iran is pulling one over on the world when it comes to Iran's nuclear ambitions. Correspondent Connor Powell starts us off tonight from Jerusalem.
Good evening.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may have had an audience of one in mind when he made his argument tonight that the Iran nuclear deal should be scrapped. It's part of his effort to convince President Trump to withdraw from the agreement. which the prime minister has long opposed. Netanyahu said, quote, that Iran lied big time as he laid out his case with 55,000 pages of documents based on what he calls an extraordinary intelligence achievement. The Iranian nuclear files obtained by the Israeli spy agency Mossad, saying that Iran can't be trusted because in the 1990s and early 2000s, Tehran lied about its nuclear program. And cited information made public in the 2011 U.S. National Intelligence Estimate that Iran continues to catalog its past nuclear program.
Even after the deal, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear weapons know-how for future use. Why would a terrorist regime hide and meticulously catalog its secret nuclear files if not to use them at a later date?
However, while Netanyahu implied it, he did not lay out a case that Iran has reconstituted its nuclear program. And Secretary of Defense Mattis testified on Capitol Hill last week that Iran is in compliance with the current agreement and praised the oversight provisions in the deal.
I will say that it is written almost with an assumption that Iran would try to cheat. So the verification, what is in there, is actually pretty robust.
Even before Netanyahu spoke, Iran's foreign minister Javed Zarif mocked Netanyahu for his 2012 United Nations General Assembly speech, writing on Twitter, "The boy who can't stop crying wolf is at it again." Undeterred by cartoon fiasco at the UNGA, you can only fool some of the people so many times.
The debate over the nuclear agreement comes as tensions are heating up on the ground in Syria between Israel and Iran. For the second time in about 2 weeks, Israeli jets reportedly struck at Iranian targets inside Syria. Bret.
Connor Powell, live in Jerusalem. Connor, thank you. President Trump appears to be having a banner day after one of our closest allies laid out evidence basically backing up what the president's been saying all along about the Iran nuclear deal. This as another world leader said that President Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize for a breakthrough in relations with North Korea. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us from the North Lawn with all the developments today. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. For months, if not a couple of years now, President Trump has insisted that Iran is not in compliance with the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, otherwise known as the Iran nuclear deal. That's one reason why late last year, despite loud criticism, he decertified it, and also despite the fact that the UN, and as we saw James Mattis, have certified that Iran is in compliance. Speaking in the Rose Garden with the president of Nigeria, President Trump said of the evidence revealed by Israel today, "I told you so."
That is just not an acceptable situation. And I've been saying that's happening. They're not sitting back idly. They're setting off missiles, which they say are for television purposes. I don't think so.
President Trump faces a May 12th deadline to either sign another waiver of sanctions against Iran or pull out of the nuclear deal.
I'm not telling you what I'm doing, but a lot of people think they know. And on or before the 12th, we'll make a decision.
In his meetings with President Macron last week, President Trump indicated he may be open to leaving the Iran nuclear deal in place if the U.S. and its allies can get a new separate deal to address Iran's long-term nuclear program, ballistic missiles, and destabilizing behavior.
That doesn't mean I wouldn't negotiate a new agreement. We'll see what happens. But I think, if anything, what's happening today and what's happened over the last little while and what we've learned has really shown that I've been 100% right.
On North Korea, President Trump today called an audible, tweeting that his pending summit with Kim Jong-un should take place at the DMZ, in the same location Kim and South Korean President Moon Jae-in met last week.
Well, it was an interesting thought, and I think that some people maybe don't like the look of that, and some people like it very much. I threw it out today as an idea.
President Trump's advisors had repeatedly ruled out a summit on the Korean Peninsula. But Fox News is told that President Trump loved the image of Kim Jong-un walking across the border to shake hands with the South Korean president, and thinks to have him there to greet Kim would be a much more powerful statement than meeting in some third country.
There's something that I like about it because you're there. You're actually there, where if things work out, there's a great celebration to be had on the site, not in a third-party country.
And more confidence-building steps between South and North Korea. The North today announcing it will sync its time zone with South Korea on May 5th. Pyongyang had been 30 minutes earlier. A small gesture, but one to which South Korean officials attach a great deal of significance.
I think this measure is being taken to show that such measures carry out his will and will be taking place at a fast pace.
In turn, South Korea will tomorrow begin dismantling the loudspeaker system that for decades has been blasting propaganda and K-pop music across the DMZ into North Korea. Over the weekend, the South Korean President Moon Jae-in credited President Trump with bringing Kim Jong-un to the table. Today, he told people he believes President Trump deserves to be recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize. Bret?
And John, some pushback from the White House on an NBC report allegedly about something the Chief of Staff said?
Yeah, there was a report that Chief of Staff John Kelly here at the White House has repeatedly in meetings referred to President Trump as an idiot and cast himself, John Kelly, as the savior of America by being the only person standing between President Trump and chaos. John Kelly, in a statement, denied all of this late this afternoon, saying, quote, "I spend more time with the president than anyone else, and we have an incredibly candid and strong relationship. He always knows where I stand, and he and I both know this story is total BS." That sounds like Kelly. "I am committed to the president, his agenda, and our country. This is another pathetic attempt to smear people close to President Trump and distract from the administration's many successes." I spoke this afternoon, Bret, with an administration official who has been in all, if not most, if not all, of the meetings that were in question here, where Kelly was, reportedly talking trash about the president. This official insists that he never, ever heard Kelly utter the word idiot. But what's clear tonight, maybe the bigger story, Bret, is that John Kelly has a faction in the White House that has the long knives out for him, trying to get him. Bret?
Clearly. John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. For more on today's announcement by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Iran's cheating on the nuclear deal, we turn to Ron Dermer, Israel's ambassador to the United States. Good evening, Ambassador. Thanks for being here.
Good to be with you.
When did Israel obtain this information? How long have you had it?
Not for that long. I'm not able to tell you exactly when we got it, but a lot of people have alleged that this information is not new. It is very new. We didn't have it before. Other intelligence agencies didn't have it before. On the one hand, it's a huge coup for Israeli intelligence, but it also shows the failures of intelligence over many, many years before that. Why did they not have this information years ago when they signed this deal? I can guarantee you that if people had that information in 2015, this deal would have never happened at the time, because it shows there's hard evidence there that Iran has a military nuclear program and that it falsified all their reports to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. What Netanyahu did today, he did not present simply a smoking gun. He presented a smoking bomb. And I think all the world should take notice of it, and we are now sharing that information. We shared it with U.S. intelligence a number of weeks ago. We are now sharing that information with the rest of intelligence agencies around the world in terms of our allies.
So there is coordination on the intelligence in an effort to corroborate it.
Yeah, well, I think that you could speak to any U.S. intelligence official and they will say that this information is authentic. I don't think anyone will deny that.
Iran, we pointed out a couple of tweets out there. This one, President Trump is jumping on a rehash of old allegations already dealt with by the IAEA to nix the deal. How convenient. Coordinated timing of alleged intelligence revelations by the boy who cries wolf just days before May 12th. But Trump's impetuousness to celebrate blew the cover.
Well, the Prime Minister just exposed the fangs of the Iranian wolf. And if we do nothing, Iran will not have to sneak in or break into the bomb. They will simply walk into the bomb. You remember 3 years ago when Netanyahu presented his case to Congress. He said the greater danger of Iran about this nuclear deal is that Iran will not need to simply violate it to get to a bomb, that they can actually get to a bomb by keeping the deal. And what Netanyahu presented today explains why, because they can, in a few years, enrich as much uranium as they want. They're developing their ballistic missiles, which they're doing every day in defiance of UN Security Council resolutions. And what Netanyahu showed today is they had an advanced weapons program. So if we do nothing, if we pretend that everything is fine, Iran will just walk into becoming a nuclear weapon state. And this is the foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world. And this deal did not block them from getting a bomb. It actually paves their way to an entire nuclear arsenal.
Okay, so let me push back with what critics say and supporters of the deal. They say Israel is safer now because this deal is in place. Is that not true?
It is totally not true, and the Prime Minister of Israel does not believe that. The head of our Mossad doesn't believe it. Our senior intelligence and military officials do not believe it. This is a great danger. And understand, when this deal was done, in addition to the problems on the nuclear side, because it didn't actually block Iran's path to the bomb, it paved it, it also freed Iran from the sanctions. And money has poured into Iranian coffers, and you see the results of an enriched Iran in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, throughout the Middle East. It's become much more dangerous and much more aggressive.
The second point they say is Iran in this deal got the benefits on the front side.
No.
And the tough stuff happens over time with the inspections.
So I'll explain to you why that's wrong. What Iran got, the tens of billions of dollars, is an argument whether it's $50 billion or $100 billion, $150 billion. That was the signing bonus of Iran doing this deal. The real money for Iran is that they can now sell oil. They're no longer under those restrictions. They are now selling over 1.5 million barrels a day more than they sold before. Now, the price of oil is around $70 a barrel. That means that Iran is getting $100 million a day, about $3 billion a month, which would be about $35 billion a year. That's today. As more investment pours into Iran, they're going to get more oil that they're going to sell. And if the price of oil rises, you may see Iran get another $100 billion a year because of this deal, which can translate over 10 to 15 years to over $1 trillion. And I'd like to tell you, Bret, just one thing. I'd like to tell you that as all this money is coming into Iran, that they're going to use that money to establish a GI Bill for returning members of the Revolutionary Guard. But what they're doing is fueling Iran's war machine. You see it in Syria, you see it in Lebanon, you see it in Yemen, you see it in Iraq, and that's why this deal is such a dangerous deal, and President Trump was right to call attention to it early on.
Quick answer. You think the president is definitively getting out May 12th?
I think he's clear which direction he's going, and it's up to him to make the decision. And we hope that the rest of the world, particularly their allies in Europe, will join the President of the United States.
Two, are we closer because of that to some military action inside Iran?
Because of what?
Because of pulling out of the deal?
No, I don't think so. I think that what the president can do is restore the sanctions very fast, have massive, crippling economic sanctions on Iran. And right now, Iran is facing some huge internal challenges that it hasn't faced in the past. You saw those protests in December where the people of Iran are fed up. They hated this regime before, but now they see that this Iranian regime is actually spending money on its adventurism throughout the Middle East. So I think we can ratchet up pressures. We can unite the world to stop Iran from ever getting a nuclear bomb, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, not in 15 years, and also roll back their aggression in the region.
Mr. Brasser, we appreciate your time on this day.
Thank you.
A migrants' march for asylum in the U.S. comes to a halt. National correspondent William Lajeunesse reports tonight from the border on what's stopping that caravan from their attempt at freedom.
About 200 Central Americans await their fate today. They arrived at the U.S. border Sunday only to find a closed door. After days of legal counseling, the migrants hope to gain entry to file asylum claims, saying they'd been forced to flee because of violence and persecution.
We know the situation in our country is not within our reach.
But as the group marched came disappointing news. U.S. officials said the San Ysidro port of entry had reached capacity and, quote, those individuals may need to wait in Mexico as CBP officers work to process those already within our facilities.
If they can send the National Guard, but not a couple of more asylum officers and handle the detention or release of veritable asylum seekers, you know, that's a question of their priorities.
Immigration lawyers claim the U.S. has a legal duty to hear the asylum seekers' claims.
You are breaking the law, and you are forcing them to break the law. That's why we have caravans.
We are a nation of laws. We have to have borders. We don't have borders, we don't have a country.
But in an interview with Fox News after touring the border in Calexico, California today, Vice President Mike Pence signaled that migrants could eventually be processed.
We're more than prepared. We have a limited capacity at that border station for asylum seekers. And when the space opens up, we will process those that are seeking asylum under the laws of this country. But these laws have to change.
From the beginning, this caravan juggled a double-edged sword. It welcomed publicity, but not the scrutiny that came with it. After President Trump criticized it as a symbol of lax U.S. laws and a porous border, some members made it personal, attacking Trump as insensitive and indifferent.
Donald Trump can't stop the caravan because he's not God. Only God has the last word, and if God brought us all the way up here in spite of everything we've suffered, then we always have faith.
Now, officials in San Ysidro say the port still lacks capacity, whether that is staff or beds, they're not saying, but the fact remains we have women and children sleeping on America's southern doorstep. Is that a moral dilemma or a message to discourage others? Bret?
William LaJeunesse along the border in California. William, thank you. The man who currently heads up Immigration and Customs Enforcement is stepping down. Thomas Homan, the acting director of ICE, made the announcement in a statement late today that he plans to leave government to focus on his family. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen told DHS employees that Homan deserves and served true to his guiding principle of mission first and selflessly agreed to return to the agency 3 days after his first retirement to issue temporary leadership of that agency. Well, terrorists are trying to infiltrate our borders. That is the warning based on new data from the Homeland Security Secretary Nielsen, who spoke exclusively to Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge about the challenges we're still facing after 9/11.
People think of border security in very different ways, but to me it's very simple. Border security is national security.
Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen says the wall is part of a broader counterterrorism strategy.
We see 15 terrorists either planning to travel or actually traveling to the United States each day, known as suspected terrorists. So that means they're coming through our legal land, port, and air, but they could be coming across that border.
In New York City, for a series of closed-door threat briefings, Nielsen spoke exclusively with Fox News at Ground Zero, not far from the 2017 attack that killed 8 on the West Side Highway.
We're just a few blocks from where that ISIS-inspired terrorists mowed down those pedestrians here in New York.
Using the internet, the terrorist organizations are inspiring followers to just pick a weapon. Bring your own weapon. Use a car, use a knife, use something you can easily pick up and go commit chaos and murder.
With the Supreme Court now weighing the third version of the travel ban affecting 5 mostly Muslim countries, Nielsen said the administration remains committed to knowing who's entering the U.S. and whether their home nation is high risk.
We owe it to our citizens to know who's traveling here and if they intend to do us harm.
In her first 4 months on the job, politics seems at play with every Homeland Security issue, from congressional funding for the border wall.
They all say to me, we're in favor of border security, and yet when we try to work with them on legislation, it falls apart.
To the recent deployment of National Guard troops.
I don't know why it was controversial. We've done this twice before to much success.
Is that a measure of the politics then?
I think so.
Nielsen pushes back against critics who say she got the top job because she worked for John Kelly, now White House Chief of Staff and the administration's first DHS chief.
I've worked at the crossroads of policy and operations. I kind of bring all that experience together because Homeland Security is a team sport, and I've played almost every role, every player, every team.
Almost every Homeland Security secretary makes the pilgrimage to Engine 10 Ladder 10 near the base of the Twin Towers.
It's moving. You know, it's kind of a reaffirmation of why we do this, of the importance of the mission, of the importance of recognizing the sacrifice of all of our first responders who truly on a good day put their lives in danger to protect their fellow citizens.
At Ground Zero, Catherine Herridge, Fox News.
Up next, President Trump targets one senator over his treatment of Dr. Ronnie Jackson. President Trump is calling for Democratic Senator John Tester to resign, tweeting that a lot of Tester's allegations against White House Dr. Ronnie Jackson are being proven wrong. The president even brought it up at his Michigan rally this weekend.
Tester started throwing out things that he's heard. Well, I know things about Tester that I could say, too. And if I said them, he'd never be elected again.
Jackson dropped his name from consideration as VA Secretary nominee late last week after allegations of drunk driving and improper behavior on the job. But Fox News has learned the Defense Department Inspector General has received the allegations into Jackson, is assessing next steps in this case, but also that the Secret Service looked into this, and a thorough review of GSA documents and police documents provided by the White House that there is no evidence that Jackson wrecked his car after drinking at a party. In fact, none of the reports involved drunk driving or anything that would fit the description, according to the Secret Service, of charges that the Democrats leveled at Jackson. Senior political analyst Bret joins us now with just what's going on here. Good evening, Bret.
Well, Bret, it was also the case that he was accused in the Tester Act, in the Tester comments, of having drunkenly been banging on a woman's door during a foreign trip during the Obama administration, to the point where the Secret Service had to get control of him to keep him from waking up the president. The Secret Service says that it has no record of any such incident. What clearly happened here, Bret, I think, is that Tester got a hold of a bunch of anonymous allegations against Ronnie Jackson. And it's perfectly legitimate for a senator to collect such things and to look into them. What he did instead was, without verifying them, he simply released them to the public, which I think has been widely viewed as being below the belt. After all, Bret, there were plenty of reasons relating to Ronnie Jackson and his lack of administrative experience as to whether he was qualified to run a giant bureaucracy like the VA, and there was plenty of reason to question that, and perhaps he was not the best man for the job. But what Tester did was a form of character assassination, unverified allegations. Haven't we had enough experience over this past year with unverified allegations and their use?
Yeah, and so as a political cudgel, is it effective? He's up for re-election in Montana, a state where President Trump won more than 80% of the counties. There's not really a strong opposition candidate there, but is it an effective tool in the midterm election hopes of John Tester to squelch them?
Well, my first instinct would be to say, yeah, if this guy did this silly thing and the president and the Republicans make an issue of it out there, that might hurt him. But remember this, Bret, the news cycle that we're living through these days is so rapid that by the time, the fall rolls around and the campaign is on, I'm not sure how many people will remember Ronnie Jackson or remember very much about the incident. It's just that, we live at such an accelerated pace in politics these days that things that seem like they're just huge and going to last forever last about 36 hours, and then we're on to something else. So I think it's possible they could make an issue of it, but it's not all clear to me that anybody will remember by the time we get to the fall.
That's right. We're one tweet away from changing the whole deal. Let me ask you about this. You listened to the ambassador, Dermer, from Israel, and you've obviously up on the Iran nuclear deal. Your thoughts on this as the president gets ready to make this decision by May 12th?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that what Benjamin Netanyahu established today was something that many of us, in fact, most of us perhaps have expected, which was that Iran has lied repeatedly, publicly, at the highest levels about its nuclear intentions. Arguably, that was the reason to try to make this deal. These revelations today do not establish, so far as I can tell, that Iran has broken that deal. And of course, the criticism of the deal, as you heard Ambassador Dermer say, is that even if Iran adheres to it, it's such a bad deal that we ought to get out of it. Of course, the counter-argument to that is if you do get out of it, Iran can accelerate its nuclear operations. And the counter to that, of course, is, well, we can impose sanctions. So we'll see.
We will see. Bret, as always, thank you.
Good.
Stormy Daniels is not giving up the fight against President Trump. The porn actress who says she had an affair with the president is now suing him for defamation. Daniels filed the complaint today, citing a tweet the president made in which he dismissed a composite sketch of a man Daniels says threatened her to stay quiet about the alleged sexual encounter. Up next, the wicked reaction to one of Washington media's biggest nights. We'll explain. First, beyond our borders tonight, the U.S.-led coalition in Iraq shut down its ground operations command in Baghdad today, signifying an end to major combat operations against ISIS there. The move by the Combined Joint Forces Land Component Command also formally handed over authority to the Combined Joint Task Force operation Inherent Resolve to continue to support the Iraqi government in its terror fight. A missile attack today in northern Syria killed at least 26 pro-government fighters who were mostly Iranians. That's according to a Syria war monitoring group. Israeli officials had no comment on that strike, but there's speculation that Israel was in fact behind it. Iranian officials are vowing revenge. Some 10,000 people were rallying in Moscow Monday to protest recent internet restrictions in Russia. This month, Russian officials began blocking the messaging app called Telegram over its refusal to hand over keys, essentially, to its data encryption. The Russian developer behind the app has refused to share data, citing privacy concerns. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. 3 top Republican candidates in the West Virginia Senate race face off in a primary debate right here on Fox News Channel in a race that could tip the U.S. Senate possibly in favor of the GOP, but the balance of power in the Senate hangs in the balance. As correspondent Peter Ducey reports, today the candidates are already fighting for West Virginians' votes, and in one case with some questionable tactics.
There are not many Hillary Clinton fans in coal country. She lost West Virginia by 42 points. So now Congressman Evan Jenkins is out with an ad accusing a primary opponent, Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, of being one of them.
Morrisey refused to support Trump over Hillary.
A picture is worth 1,000 words, and this picture is also fake. Now the Attorney General is tweeting, "Despicable at Evan Jenkins WV photoshopped my photo with @RealDonald Trump and substituted it with Hillary, who I have always strongly opposed. Will the media call out Jenkins for his lying and dishonesty? Where is the accountability as this liar tries to deceive voters?" Jenkins says he has no regrets about the edited picture.
That picture speaks volumes of exactly what Patrick Morrisey was. He was a never-Trumper. He wouldn't vote for Donald Trump in the primary.
Morrisey is accumulating out-of-town endorsements from the editors of the National Review, Senator Ted Cruz, and Senator Rand Paul, who will join Morrisey on the trail this week. His campaign argues he's got the most conservative record of anybody running, and that, quote, "When voters find out about Patrick's defeat of President Obama's war on coal, Patrick's efforts to expand gun rights, and Patrick's protection of unborn life, they are eager to support his candidacy." A group with ties to GOP leadership is spending big to boost either Morrisey or Jenkins. The Mountain Families PAC has already spent $1.3 million on ads against Republican Don Blankenship, who is still on probation after a year in jail for a misdemeanor conviction tied to the Upper Big Branch mine explosion that killed 29.
I think it probably moves me up a little bit because I don't think that Mitch McConnell realizes how anti-him and how anti the establishment West Virginians are.
Blankenship is now trying to offset some of the 7 figures Republicans are spending against him by spending, he says, 7 figures times something of his own money just on the primary. And if he does make it out of the primary, Blankenship tells me the hardest part about beating the Democrat Joe Manchin would be having to spend time with him. Bret?
Peter Ducey live in West Virginia. Peter, thanks. We'll see you there tomorrow. Those top 3 candidates will join Martha McCallum and me for a debate in West Virginia, Morgantown, actually. Bring it to you live from there tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, following an abbreviated version of Special Report at 6 o'clock and the story after the debate with Martha. All the black ties and beautiful gowns upstaged Saturday night when the entertainer at the annual White House Correspondents' Association dinner turned in a blistering performance that got a lot of attention and reaction. Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, with all of the hubbub.
The backlash is building against the White House Correspondents' Association after what is widely viewed as a debacle at its annual dinner. President Trump tweeted today the dinner is dead, and many journalists are insisting the organization apologize for the harshly personal attacks by comedian Michelle Wolf against such targets as Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Kellyanne Conway, and Mike Pence.
I actually really like Sarah. I think she's very resourceful. Like, she burns facts, and then she uses that ash to create a perfect smoky eye. If a tree falls in the woods, how do we get Kellyanne under that tree? I'm not suggesting she gets hurt, just stuck. He thinks abortion is murder, which, first of all, don't knock it till you try it. And when you do try it, really knock it. You know, you got to get that baby out of there.
And there were raunchy jokes about the president's sex life and Ivanka Trump and tampons, plus F-bombs carried live on cable. Bloomberg's Margaret Talev, who heads the association, is refusing to apologize, saying in a statement today that unfortunately, Wolf's monologue didn't match the dinner's unifying tone of support for a free press. The fiasco was a political gift for President Trump, who attacked dishonest journalists that same night at a Michigan rally.
They don't have sources. The sources don't exist in many cases. I could be up there tonight smiling like I love where they're hitting you shot after shot. These people, they hate your guts.
The dinner, intended to raise money for scholarships, has been under fire for years since it became a celebrity-studded affair that seemed more about cavorting with movie stars than celebrating journalism. Other comedians, from Don Imus to Stephen Colbert, have generated controversy. But this time, the dinner's future, or at least its format, is in doubt. There's some selective outrage here by Trump supporters who aren't bothered by his personal attacks and insults, and by Trump detractors who are making excuses for Michelle Wolf's crude jokes. But there's no dispute this is a big black eye for the Washington press corps. Bret?
Howie, thanks. Up next, a shocking headline, but could tripling the rent in the poorest households really help transform the welfare system? We'll take a fair and balanced look next. Down day on Wall Street today. The Dow lost 148. The S&P 500 dropped 22. The Nasdaq finished down 54. President Trump wants to toughen requirements for people seeking government assistance. Just days ago, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development proposed a big hike in rent for some in the poorest of neighborhoods. Tonight, correspondent Doug McKelway explores whether the administration's plans to reform, current welfare system could really be moving up.
The Washington Post headline was a head-turner. Quote, HUD Secretary Ben Carson's proposal to triple rents for poorest households would hurt single mothers the most. Proponents say the Department of Housing and Urban Development's plan to revise public housing assistance is not so draconian.
60% of people that are on rental assistance are elderly or disabled, so they're completely exempt.
The plan would require landlords to verify income every 3 years, not every year. HUD Secretary Ben Carson hopes it will simplify the process and push recipients to find better jobs.
They're not being charged anymore for a 3-year period. During that time, they might begin to understand, you know what, I can take control here.
But opponents are infuriated that renters would be required to spend 5% more of their monthly gross income on rent, that deductions for some child care and medical costs would be eliminated, and that caps for the neediest able-bodied would jump from $50 to $150 a month.
In no state in this country can a worker who's earning the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour afford even a one-bedroom apartment at market rate.
Proponents ask, if not now, when?
Because unemployment is at the lowest rate that it has been in 20 years.
It's part of the administration's all-out effort to reform the welfare state. This month, Mr. Trump signed an order requiring all agencies to review their welfare programs. That, while congressional Republicans and some GOP governors are moving to include work requirements for food stamps and Medicaid recipients. Proponents of the HUD changes note that the highest housing costs tend to be in coastal liberal enclaves like San Francisco, where they say zoning regulations put the cost of housing out of reach for all but the wealthy. Bret?
Doug, thank you. Strong winds are hampering firefighter efforts to battle a wildfire in north-central Arizona. Wildfire east of Sedona has grown to nearly 10,000 acres and is causing hundreds of people to be evacuated there. More than 500 firefighters are working to contain the blaze. Next up, the future of the Iran nuclear deal and what the Israeli Prime Minister said today. Our panel weighs in on the evidence laid out next.
Iran lied about never having a nuclear weapons program. The Iran deal, the nuclear deal, is based on lies. It's based on Iranian lies and Iranian deception. And in a few days' time, President Trump will make his decision on what to do with the nuclear deal. I'm sure he'll do the right thing for the United States, the right thing for Israel, and the right thing for the peace of the world.
That is just not an acceptable situation. And I've been saying that's happening. They're not sitting back idly. They're setting off missiles, which they say are for television purposes. I don't think so.
The Israeli Prime Minister with a detailed layout of evidence he says Israelis got from Iran. You heard the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. saying in recent weeks they've been sharing it with the U.S. The Iranians pushing back on Twitter today. Breaking, the boy who can't stop crying wolf is at it again. Undeterred by cartoon fiasco at United Nations General Assembly, you can only fool some of the people so many times, referring to a speech Netanyahu gave there. But the seriousness here is that 12 days from now, the President of the United States decides whether to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. Let's bring in our panel. Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com, host of the new show Benson Harf on Fox News Radio, which begins next Monday. Congratulations on that. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. Okay, Mara, you heard the ambassador here saying how serious it is with the reams of information that he says the Israelis got about a nuclear program that essentially was designed to make a nuclear weapon.
Right. And what Netanyahu did today, an incredibly simple, clear exposition with the big letters and the graphics, was to give the reasons why the Iran deal was a bad deal and should never have been entered into. He didn't really explain what happens after the U.S. gets out, but he certainly corroborated all of President Trump's instincts, and everybody who's talked to the president expects that he will pull out on May 12th, you know, or sometime before that.
A lot of articles, a lot of people have been saying that the Prime Minister was essentially doing that for an audience of one for President Trump.
Yeah, I noticed that was said earlier in the show, and I actually disagree with that. I think Trump actually has a pretty good idea of what he wants to do. The real conflict is with European countries who really do want to uphold the deal and who do want to find a way to keep it going, learning that this deal was broken. I mean, if failing to be honest going into the deal means that the deal is no good. And it is interesting that we've been told for so many years, Iran is in compliance, Iran is in compliance. That echo chamber from the Obama administration is very good at getting its talking points out. They've been saying over and over that there's nothing can do because Iran is in compliance. Well, when today Netanyahu says this is built on a throne of lies, then they say, oh, we always knew that. Well, you have to pick one or the other. Either they're complying or there is a complete falsehood at the foundation of this deal.
Right. So the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal structure, says essentially that you had to say the honest statements at the beginning. Right. That was the first compliance. If you're not complying with that, then the whole thing's not in compliance.
That's right. So it was a prerequisite for the deal going into implementation in the very first place. And the requirement of Iran was to attest fully and completely and transparently what they had done in regards to their nuclear program in the past. And the Iranians lied through their teeth, saying that they never had a nuclear weapons program. And now we see today, I think, very strong, incontrovertible evidence laid out very clearly from the Israelis that that was just not true. The Iranians absolutely had this program up through 2003. Then they broke it off into overt and covert. And crucially, the same person who oversaw the illicit, illegal program that they denied existed is still in control of the covert side of the nuclear program. I thought it was a devastating and powerful performance today from Netanyahu, and it should influence. That information should influence our president.
Here is the French president characterizing days ago the Iran nuclear deal.
There is an existing framework called the JCPOA to control the nuclear activity of Iran. We signed it at the initiative of the United States. We signed it, both the United States and France. That is why we cannot say we should get rid of it, but we should not abandon it without having something substantial and more substantial instead.
So I guess the real question, Mara, is can this evidence force or push the European allies, France, we saw Angela Merkel here, the president's going to London to see the British Prime Minister. Can it force them to get on with a new round of sanctions outside of the Iran deal?
Well, that is the big question. They haven't wanted to. They were willing to build on extra protections about ballistic missiles or maybe about Iran's meddling in the region. But they want to build on this deal. They don't want to start from scratch. And that's the question. Can the United States get the Europeans to agree to extra sanctions, more. And don't forget, the president has another deadline, and it's midnight tonight, to see if he's going to continue those exemptions for the steel and aluminum tariffs against the EU. That matters when he's asking the Europeans to cooperate on something else like the Iran nuclear deal plus.
I also think it's interesting, Macron points out that they signed this treaty at the U.S.'s behest. And it is important that we be good with our word, and why learning that other people aren't being good with their word is important. It also speaks to why it was such a mistake to not take this to the Senate and have a broad public discussion where people could really hash out what we wanted to do with Iran. This is not a treaty. It's very easy to get in and out of it precisely because it's not a Senate-approved, Senate-ratified treaty. It's a good warning that for Donald Trump that if he wants to sign a peace treaty, he does need to make that public case and get everybody on board so we can have a good treaty in North Korea.
Yeah, it was kind of a backwards disapproval by the Senate in the construct that was put together. I want to turn topics to North Korea. Here's the president on the meeting upcoming, he says, and the meeting sites.
We're looking at various countries, including Singapore. And we are also talking about the possibility of the DMZ, Peace House, Freedom House. And there's something that I thought was intriguing. There's something that I like about it because you're there. You're actually there, where if things work out, there's a great celebration to be had.
So he's looking at the images here. Meantime, the South Korean president had this to say, according to Reuters, translated by Reuters: President Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. What we need is only peace. There's some good feelings, I guess, coming out of South Korea from that meeting.
He's pretty optimistic.
Yeah, and well, if this does work out, of course the president deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. The last president got one for doing literally nothing. This would be something. I'm among the crowd that is pleased to see these developments, but skeptical of the North Koreans and their willingness to keep their word, speaking of outlaw regimes that do not. But the South Koreans are at the table as well. The handshake was historic, and it does seem like President Trump's unusual approach to foreign policy has, at the very least, brought both sides together. Not sure what the Americans might be willing to do, and here we are. Definite positive steps, but a lot farther to go.
Yeah, trust but verify.
Yeah.
The nuclear site that they're closing down is a nuclear site that in part collapsed.
Right.
So you have to kind of look at...
Right, and the administration has been very good at sending these messages. Look, we know how difficult it is. We know that they've cheated on every other deal. We're going to walk away if we have to. But the president now seems to be getting super optimistic. He's already talking about the victory party and the celebration that he wants to have right there at the DMZ. So the question is he really, really willing to walk away if he can't get the kind of assurances that he needs from the North Koreans?
I think there is an issue, though, too. If they were to do this on site, it ramps up the pressure in a way that could motivate people toward a good solution, not just that it would be great for...
You mean the surroundings would then force the inevitability of the deal?
It might help contribute to that. But it's absolutely true. If we're talking about Iran being a regime that lies, we have such a great history of North Korea being duplicitous and falsifying what they're doing. And so it is good that people are being cautious. I think it is true, though, that a year ago, close to a year ago, we were talking about how Donald Trump is supposedly bringing us to the brink of nuclear war. We are in a very different place, and that alone is important. People should think about what about his foreign policy has led us to this place.
It is amazing when he talks about the images and the power of images. Clearly, he knows that part of it. When we come back, an emotional